and welcome to the Techstrong AI podcast. I'm Amanda Razani, and with me today I have Anita Kirkovska, and she is the head of growth at Vellum. How are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks for inviting me at your podcast. I've seen some of the previous presentations and the talks that you guys covered. It all seems so fun.
Oh, thank you. I learn a lot. I'm happy to have you on the show today. So,
Yeah.
can you share a little bit about Vellum? What services do you provide?
Yeah, so Vellum is an AI development platform. We support the whole life cycle for companies who want to build with AI. So think about if product teams would like to prototype with AI, if they want to identify whether using AI is actually useful for a problem to be solved for the user, they use our prototyping tool to test whether this is possible. Once they figure out what works, then they work with engineering, again, using our product to operationalize the whole thing. And then they use evaluations to stress test it, to prepare it for production. And then the whole cycle also covers putting it in production. And it's an interesting loop that happens between prototyping and having something in production, because interestingly enough, with AI, it never ends when you put it in production, because AI models are so non-deterministic. They have high variance in their outputs. And so controlling for those outputs is the biggest task to be done from PMs and engineers. And so once they have it in production, then we provide the right tools for them to observe and capture real world interactions. And then those teams basically feed that data into the product and then evaluate and test. And it all goes in this continuous loop. You will forever work on your AI product.
Absolutely. And I imagine as they're using these tools too, they realize that their needs have changed or they need other solutions. And so constantly adapting the technology.
Absolutely. I feel like working with AI these days, it's so dynamic with different models just showing up every day. Just like the last 2 weeks, I think we had around 4 new AI models from OpenAI, from NVIDIA, and I think NVIDIA launched the best open source model. So it's definitely a continuous work that all these teams are doing, not only to switch a model or to test a new model, but then the requirements are changing constantly. And working with AI, it requires for that active analytics and observations. And if you're building more complex agentic workflows, observability and evaluations, it even becomes even more important, because an agent can take so many different directions because it's autonomous. And you need to be able to capture all of those, analyze why an agent made a certain decision, and then be able to steer it better in the next one. So definitely a lot of work to be done. And yeah, I agree with you. Teams are learning every day using these tools. They're just testing new things, finding out new possibilities for the product. And it's honestly amazing to see it.
Vellum recently released a state of AI development report, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And can you share some of the key findings of that report?
Yeah. So there were a few quite interesting results from that report. None of them were surprising, I would say, at least for us, because we're in this field just working with companies, helping them do this stuff. So we see it every day. But half of the developers that we interviewed for this report, they are all building an agentic workflow in 2025. So it's not at all something that we want companies to be building. They are already building it. And all of these are enterprise applications, but we can debate all day what is an AI agent, what does it actually entails, and all of that. That's the first major result that, it just proved that we're in this agent era where everyone is building agentic workflows. Everyone wants to automate their job. Everyone wants these LLMs to actually do the job for them. However, in a contrast to that, the results actually showed that only 25% of those same developers have actually something in production. So something challenging is happening. Is it hallucinations? Is it misalignment between the product, the legal team? There's so many high risk jobs to be done, especially with bigger companies, especially for companies who work in highly regulated spaces, right? So there's so much coordination that needs to be done. So many things need to be right for your team to be able to publish this in production. And it's quite interesting. Like everyone is building something, like less than 25% are actually putting this in production. So there's a lot to be done in evaluations, in observability, uh, just like testing these models across the spectrum of like, are they calling the right tools? Are they interacting with other models in the right way? Is my output correct? Do I need to check for context relevance? Like we've seen a lot of these interesting concepts that developers were using last year and the year before that, where we said, okay, well, LLMs are quite useful. They're smart, but they don't know our data. They don't have the context of our data. And so 2 years ago, everyone started to build RAG-based chatbot. That's retrieval augmented generation chatbot. And they all were trying to use this new tag, this new vector databases to embed all of their business data in a fast and like scalable way to be able to provide this data to an LLM model at inference time, right? So once someone is interacting with my chatbot, I actually want my LLM to be able to look at my data and then answer with some context relevancy. And so, like, if you think about it, there's so many things and so many loops and so many things being done in parallel. And the LLM by itself is non-deterministic. And so it makes sense that only 25% of developers have actually something in production. And when we asked them, what are the biggest challenges? And like for obvious reasons, they all said like hallucinations, but like that's the number one thing that you think about. But what I would say is something that we see lately is it's a misalignment between the product and engineering team when they work on these AI products.
So communication is the issue.
It's mostly aligning on the things that they care about and the things that they want to do. And I can expand on that. So like, let's say, for example, we worked with Redfin last year. They were building their own chatbot to serve their customers when they're looking for houses to buy or to rent. And so because they work in this highly regulated space, they needed to be able to put clear guardrails and constraints to the model on how the model should actually recommend you places to live. It shouldn't discriminate based on any of the protected demographic, characteristics protected by the latest law that was just passed. And so doing that, you can imagine how hard it is. Like, how can I manage this thing that I don't know how it actually comes up with these answers, right? And so interestingly enough, their product team is the one that cares about how this output is going to be created in production. Engineers, they don't care about that for obvious reasons. Like that's how products are built. Product cares about like the user journey and how the users are interacting with the product, and engineers are here to just like do the thing and build the functionalities around it. But for so long, because the field of AI felt like very technical, every company just relied on their engineering teams. And so they became the biggest bottleneck because we expect the engineers to prompt these models. So we expect them to write the prompts for these models. We expect them to orchestrate their backend workflows to be able to productionize a solution. We expect engineers to evaluate and test, basically do unit tests, right? To test the workflow end to end to be able to find some like regressions or like ways on how it can improve the output. We expect for them to actually plan for this whole thing. Like, what should be the outcome? How should I code this thing? Which concept should I utilize versus which ones I should avoid? Memory, long-term memory, short, like there's so many things that need to be done. And then in production, what do I do with my product now? Like for real world data, your product might be just performing so much differently than with the test data as you were building it. And so because companies rely heavily on engineers, they became the biggest bottleneck. And with that, product managers and product teams are now taking the lead. And that collaboration between product and engineers need to happen sooner rather than later so that goals are aligned, necessities are satisfied, product cares about like the output, developers should operationalize this thing, should add like error logic management, guardrails, like everything that, a good engineer does. But product needs to own this process. And there is a certain third team within this whole group. Those are the subject matter experts. In the case with Redfin, I know that they work with their legal team, who was actually creating a lot of the test cases in order for the product and engineering team to test their workflows on. So they were basically writing like question answer pairs that the product team was passing throughout the workflow that they built, and that they were marking it, whether it's true or not. And they were going back to their prompt to then optimize it. And like, as I'm saying this, you can imagine like how long the process is, like that whole back and forth. And imagine if only one person is doing it or one team.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because this is a conversation we were just talking about this morning, and that being that the engineers need to think more like product managers because they're creating a product for their users.
Yep. And it goes vice versa. Like these days, honestly, we're seeing that product managers are becoming more technical. And in the age of AI, the product manager role will become so much more technical. It's probably going to be like product engineering, because we still require so much more adjustments made on these workflows by the product people. And there is no other way than taking the product people to actually prompt these models to be able to think about, what's the workflow that we want to create, or what's the experience that we want to create for the user, and what are the goals that we're optimizing for. And because this whole process never ends, the product team is always involved.
Yeah, I feel like also just across the board, I'm hearing more and more roles being blended.
Yeah,
So many different types of roles,
absolutely.
people expecting to be wearing multiple hats.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And like, we can also talk about like junior developers. Like these days, I feel like the companies that we're working with, they're not even thinking of hiring junior developers. It's mostly blending within other functions within the company who are, adopting these more technical roles or technical skills when it comes to AI development. It's like
Yes.
PMs, they need to understand how to prompt these models. They need to understand which is the best model on the market right now. They need to understand how they can align this model to be able to work in production. Then we have legal. If you're building a marketing AI powered platform, then the whole team of marketing needs to be able to be part of this whole process. If a healthcare company is building a solution for, let's say, clinicians, and we have one customer that does absolutely the same thing, they're building voice agents for clinicians to use to triage like patients, and then answer questions for patients like through the phone. Everything is automated. The AI voice agent, it works 24/7. It doesn't eat, it doesn't get tired. It just works, and it works very reliably, right? Um, and so with Relay Health, what is really interesting is that they have a whole team or of care navigators who are now becoming more technical, and they call them content engineers, because they work with all these prompts to then adopt the AI's response or the AI's communication that you're going to get on the phone. And they're becoming engineers because they understand how to do that. They're working with technology. They're aligning this technology to work for them so they can automate most of their job and be, more available for more patients. So the patients, they don't fall through the cracks of the healthcare system, which we know is broken.
Yeah. So, from your experience working with a variety of companies,
Mhm.
what tips do you have to make sure they start off on the right foot and they ensure success when it comes to implementing a new technology solution?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that I recently talked about on a recent AI summit in New York. Honestly, like how we're thinking about that is this whole cycle of things that you need to do that I just like briefly mentioned. One, for obvious reasons, as I mentioned, like you need to have collaboration to happen between all these functions within your company. But how do you actually enable that? And so what we usually say is like prototyping when you want to initiate a new solution for your company that utilizes AI to do whatever you want that solution to do. it must start with the product team. But how do you give the product team the right tools to be able to simulate that whole conversation that needs to happen with an AI, right? And so far they've been heavily reliant on the engineering team to put up like a quick demo of some sorts, or like to connect some of these models so they can play with it. Or recently I've heard that a very popular sales um, AI powered SDR company, they actually have their product managers in cursor in their IDEs coding with the developers to test for these models. But like, that's not the ideal experience. Not every PM will actually understand, how to code. And so the first step that a company needs to get right is to give the right tools for the product teams to be able to test different models, to test different simulations. Like, how can I integrate AI within this system versus this? How can I integrate AI with my database versus an external tool? And just providing that visual builder that PMs can use to quickly prototype things. Once they have that working, then PMs would come to board meetings showing demos. So now the conversation is switched from, I think this is going to work, to here is a demo, it actually works. And I didn't even rely on my engineering team. I didn't waste any resources because I got the right tools, right? And so like at that point, decision making becomes easier. Now like the team can say, okay, well, this absolutely works. We might need to do some tweaking. What's the next step? Well, now let's pull the engineers to tell us like what are the best practices? How do we organize this whole thing? What do we need to do? Like they're absolutely the experts here. Once they do that, then we have a first version. Once you have that first version that you feel happy about, that you want to test with some examples, then you pull some subject matter experts. You pull your legal team. Okay, well, there are some laws that we need to abide. We work in this highly regulated space. We care about security. We care about trust. How do we align this according to that? And then they start to write like all these test cases. If a user asks about this, make sure you answer with this. If a user asks another sensitive question, make sure that the model is aligned to say something that actually should be said in production. And so like they create like 1,000, if not like 10,000, 50,000, how many examples they might need to be able to stress test this system before they actually put it in production. Because like if their solution is very high, if their solution is high risk, then they need to put more time in this stage to test it internally. Once they do that, the whole thing gets passed towards the engineering team. The engineering team is taking this whole thing, thinking that, okay, this is ready for production. Everyone has tested it. We have a green light. It's going to operationalize it. It's going to prepare it for production. And like what we usually like to advise companies is that your AI features should be separately deployed from your main application, because the chances are that you're going to be making more updates to your AI features than your standard software functionalities, right? Because we, again, come back to that concept that we need to update our AI features and we need to tune them even daily, depends on the product. So then they create this whole release management, they put it in production, they have all the right like management policies and all of that. Once it's in production, it's the product team again. Now people are using it. So now we're not only measuring like analytics or user behavior or things like that. We're capturing feedback. And feedback can be implicit or explicit. Like when, do you use ChatGPT? I'm assuming you do, like
Yes.
everyone does these days, right? Like ChatGPT would ask you, like, was this answer good or not? That's collecting feedback. So as you vote on that output, OpenAI captures that feedback, and that feedback is stored in the original evaluation table that the product team is looking at. And if they say, okay, well, we got some sensitive outputs in production today, our customers didn't like it for various reasons. Let's see how we can update how this workflow works. But there is a tricky and like very interesting procedure here that should be maintained, is that we know that prompts are very sensitive, and you don't want to change a prompt that will solve one case, but that will introduce regressions to other parts of the system. And so having the right tooling around this process as well. Like it must be done. Like companies should not overlook this, because changing a prompt can actually introduce a lot of regressions, and you need to be able to capture whether you're doing that before you publish a new update in production. Like those are all of the stages that basically go into this loop that must be done in order for you to have something reliable in production. Anything else, you know, above or like, different from this, missing one piece of the puzzle, it can get you some problems, especially for high risk, solutions.
That was great advice. So, if you were going to sum all that up with one key takeaway for our audience today, what would that be?
We usually say test-driven AI development. You need to run a lot of tests. You need to evaluate early. You need to break your workflows in-house. Users should not be breaking it in production. So evaluate early, build confidence early, put it in production, and continuously improve it.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you, Amanda, for the invite again.
And thank you to our audience. Stay tuned. There's more.